Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, it's Films and Stuff, a new weekend, a new episode. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Great to hear. I am also very well. And today we've got kind of a passion topic that we've agreed to just socialize and discuss between ourselves, huh?
Yeah. You know, in an effort to make our episodes maybe a little bit more evergreen and a little bit more, maybe a little bit less about something we're specifically watching right now. I think this came up last week or maybe even the week before. We were talking about movies that maybe haven't necessarily stood the test of time. And, Hollywood, especially in the last, I'd say 5, maybe 10 years, has gone through, let's say, a phase of wanting to do reboots, right? And we've seen legacy sequels, which is one thing, right? Where we've seen Top Gun Maverick, we've seen, how many Creeds have we seen? How many, Rambos have we seen? And then we've also got they're kind of like legacy sequels, but they're also kind of like reboots or in between, right? So you've got a little bit of, what was it? The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did one.
That's right.
So you've got a bunch of these shows and a bunch of these movies which are effectively being retold for various reasons. Disney is in the forefront of that. I think, they've been making live action versions of all their movies from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. The thing I was struck by when I look back, we said 80s, but we really kind of meant like 80s, 90s, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing I was struck by when I look back to the 80s was how many movies were already either sequels or remade. I was just kind of looking at, if you go to Wikipedia and you just look at kind of like the 80s in film or the 90s in film, I was going through the list. A lot of it has already been remade, right? There's an Indiana Jones, which I think actually is on my list, but there's a number of Indiana Joneses, right? Batman, Back to the Future, there were already 3. Coming to America, recently reboot. Star Wars, still going strong. You and I are huge fans of Endor. There was a Crocodile Dundee 1 and 2. There was a sequel to Beverly Hills Cop. Ghostbusters, still going strong even today, right? Lethal Weapon is a television show.
Off the top of my head, I can tell you that, so they're making a sequel to Twins called Triplets.
Oh. Who's in that?
So apparently Danny DeVito, Arnold Schwarzenegger are reprising. The idea originally was to have Eddie Murphy play the triplet, the third brother that they didn't know about.
No,
I
this
don't
is all
know
wrong. It should be like Batista. No, it should be Batista and Lannister.
No, but so this is a legacy sequel. It's not a reboot. So the idea is that, this is like the Top Gun Maverick, which is to say we're going to bring back the original stars and we're going to take a new twist on a sequel. So you've seen that, I think, if I remember correctly, if I heard correctly, I'm pretty sure Beverly Hills Cop, Eddie Murphy has a script for a legacy sequel for Beverly Hills Cop.
It's
one of two things. Yeah,
Hold the phone.
Go on.
I cannot tell you the level of apathy I have for Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito in a movie. Why don't they reboot it again with Lannister? What's that dude's name?
Which Lannister? Tyrion?
Yeah. Tyrion Lannister and
Peter
Dave
Dinklage?
Yes, Peter Dinklage and Dave Bautista.
Yeah, that would be, exactly. That would
way
be
better, right? Batista's so
total
funny.
Reboot, yeah.
I feel like that would be, is anyone excited to see Danny DeVito on TV? He's so weird now.
He is, but he's got a cult following because of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
All right. Sorry to interrupt. I had to get that out.
No problem. So I think in any case, the point you're making is absolutely right, which is to say Hollywood is either going in the brand new reboot, a la we saw that with Total Recall, right? It was a retelling of the same story.
Yes.
Or they're going with legacy sequels, a la, the most recent successful one was Top Gun, but then we also saw Coming to America 2 earlier this year. I can't remember. But yes, during the pandemic, they released that. And that was also a legacy sequel, not a retelling.
For me, the distinction is, or maybe not the distinction, but how you make the determination is, for Top Gun, you cannot reboot that and have anyone else be Maverick. You could have a spinoff, right, where it was Rooster, and you've got, a picture of Goose and you've got a picture of Maverick, and references to them, but you cannot do a reboot. Just like I think Back to the Future, when you've Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? When you've got a character that's so
iconic.
The actor is actually known as the character more than anyone else. It's hard to reboot. Ghostbusters. Yeah,
it's a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. You're right. When you think of Top Gun, you think of Tom Cruise. Yeah. Just like when you think of Mission Impossible, you think of Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
And when you think of Tom Cruise, that's true. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Whereas
you wouldn't want anyone other than Matthew Broderick to play Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
Which is why if you were to see a Ferris Bueller quote unquote reboot / legacy sequel, it would probably be about Ferris's son or grandson.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be about Ferris Bueller himself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they tried that a little bit with Die Hard, right? And that
they
one
did with Die Hard 4, I think, and with Die Hard 5. That's right. They introduced the daughter and the son.
Yeah. And it wasn't great. Same thing. Remember there was what's that dude's name? Will Smith, and his son did kind of the Karate Kid, and again Jaden Smith, right? And it didn't really go over well. And then they bring back Cobra Kai, which is kind of like a spin-off, right? A legacy to it.
Yeah, a legacy
and it does
kind of thing,
it does pretty good, right? I mean, those characters are just so well known. Just like you can't do Star Wars again, you can do spin-offs of Star Wars where you reintroduce different characters, but you can't have someone else other than Mark Hamill ever play Luke Skywalker, right? You can't have anyone else.
Which is precisely why on my list I didn't put Indiana Jones, because even though the third one was a bit sorry, not the third one. The second one, definitely, right? If you look at the third one, it wasn't bad. That was the one with the Last Crusade with Sean Connery.
Yeah.
But if you look at the second one, Temple of Doom, there's a lot in there that today would not get past Hollywood screeners, right? It wouldn't pass the sniff test because it's so offensive on paper to a lot of people.
It's funny that movies either have to be offensive, like Deadpool, or they cannot be offensive at all, right? It's either you've got to lean into it or stay away from it, but you can't just...
And even Deadpool, I mean, the idea of being offensive is being offensive as in counter culture, but that culture is acceptable.
Yeah.
Which is to say he's offensive because he's a guy who kills people and he's violent, but he's not offensive because he's yelling out the, racist tropes everywhere, left, right, and center. Even in the comics, you don't see him running around calling people the N-word or calling people anything bad or racist.
Yeah. So what's on your list? So
I was just as I was telling you before we started recording, I think that on my list there's very few actual movies, and the more I started thinking about it, the more I thought it's not just about the movie. I think it's also a little bit about the genre.
Yeah.
Because Hollywood has, I think it comes and goes in waves, but at the moment, for example, I don't think. For example, it's not on my list right now, but for example, comedies are kind of out in Hollywood.
Yeah.
When you think of a pure comedy, I can't think of the last pure comedy Hollywood has released. The closest I can think of is a rom-com. You see a lot of rom-coms, but again, even rom-coms, their heyday was in the 90s, right? Where you had 4 Weddings and a Funeral style thing. You had a lot of these Hugh Grant kind of things or Bridget Jones's Diary kind of thing. You're not seeing very many of those now.
Nope.
And I think the pure comedy, especially, I can't think of the last mainstream Hollywood one that came out. So along that vein, I was thinking of something like Trading Places.
Yeah.
Where I think a modern day equivalent of Trading Places, or maybe even Brewster's Millions, would be interesting.
Who's in Trading Places? Who are you going to cast?
So the original Trading Places was, if I remember correctly, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, probably. They're like, and then there are kind of like two, not sequels.
And then you had the two brothers, right?
Yeah, but you also had like this thing with like, yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis and her daughter. Oh, which I should know her name, Lindsay Lohan, I think it was. And then there was another one with like a father and a son. That there was like a few of these, right?
Oh no, yeah. So this was.
But the original, yeah.
No, that was different. So because in Trading Places, the concept wasn't something more less fantastical in the sense that, if I remember correctly, Eddie Murphy was like a down on his luck guy who was, I can't remember if he was homeless or not homeless in that movie. And the two brothers who owned their trading firm made a bet with each other. And I remember the bet was like only for $1, was that it was basically My Fair Lady, where they bet each other that they could take Eddie Murphy's character, who was like this down on his luck homeless guy, and they could pit him against Dan Aykroyd, who was like their star trader in their trading commodities firm. And the idea was that they were going to make Eddie Murphy this millionaire trader, and they were going to say that, we're so good we can make him as good as our star trader kind of
really
thing. And then and don't hold me to this is what I remember. And then by the end of the movie, it was Dan Aykroyd who was kind of down on his luck, and Eddie Murphy was the one who was riding high until they realized what the brothers were up to, and that it was all a game and that they were playing with people's lives. And then Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd worked together to bring the brothers down. I remember they made a huge bet against orange futures from Florida. They shorted everything, and prices went sky high, and they ended up losing all their money. So, whereas the ones you're talking about are like Freaky Friday, which was much more fantastical, which is where Jamie Lee Curtis becomes Lindsay Lohan. Yeah. Like they swap brains.
Yeah, exactly. So they swap bodies. Yeah,
brains, exactly. Yeah. So. And then in Brewster's Millions, the other thing I was thinking of was like, again, this is another like seminal late 70s, early 80s comedy with Richard Pryor, Brewster's Million, where this guy who's not super wealthy inherits $1 million from his, I don't know, uncle or great grandfather, which at that time was a lot of money. Yeah. And he had until the end of the day or until the end of the week to spend it all. Yeah. Without anyone realizing what he was doing. And if he did, he won. He got way more. He got the $200 million fortune or something that his father had actually let him, or his relative had let him. So that's what I was thinking. And then finally, the last not pure comedy, but the last comedy I thought of was Airplane, which definitely couldn't be made today. Airplane back then could not be made the way it is today, from then today. Like the one advantage to Airplane was they offended everyone. They offended Jewish people, black people, Asian Arabs, people, white people, Arabs. There was no holding back. So I still think it's one of the funniest all-time comedies that I've seen, especially when I was growing up. So for me, that's definitely one of them.
What do you think about, before I blow your mind with my suggestion, what do you think of E.T., the extraterrestrial? Are you surprised? This is Disney film, right? Spielberg.
Is E.T. Disney? I don't think it's Disney.
No.
I think it's
Universal.
Universal, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's not.
Are you surprised there hasn't been a remake of E.T.?
I'm not, because E.T. was also quite close to perfect, man. That's why I also didn't put Back to the Future on my list.
Back to the Future is a very complicated story, I think. Not complicated in terms of plot, but I've heard that, like, when you go to film school, whatever that means, that a Back to the Future is specifically pointed out as maybe the only successful movie that does not follow like a traditional like, story arc. And it's got the weird thing about his mom in it. Like, there was kind of some weird stuff in there as well. I think that that's one of the reasons that it hasn't been remade. And to be honest, when Back to the Future came out, that was maybe one of the very few time travel movies. Now everything's so time travel, it's not really like that difficult to get your mind around going back and you screw up the timeline, you got to go back and fix it and blah, 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 right? Like the novelty of the problem is a little bit worn off, right?
Yeah, so I read somewhere that Robert Zemeckis was asked about making a Back to the Sequel reboot.
Okay.
And he said no, and it'll never be made while I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And because obviously Hollywood execs will see that as a cash cow, and it will be a cash cow.
Yeah.
Right? But he said that, why would I make another sequel to what is widely considered as one of the most perfect movies out there?
I agree. I think the original cannot be beat. The sequel had a lot of redeeming parts. The third one, partially enjoyable, but obviously it was just milked for everything. So you think E.T. was too perfect, not able to be?
Yeah, I think it's one of those movies that there's no natural story for a legacy sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Having
said
there
that,
is.
I mean, he could come back, right?
He could come back. I was just thinking exactly the same thing. Right? He could come back and he ends up beating Elliot's kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you put Drew Barrymore back in it, and they reestablished the connection, and you could make it if someone asked you to make it work, you could make it work. I think the hard part is that movie was just so sweet and innocent. Yeah. I would expect that Spielberg does something similar to Zemeckis, saying, "Look, I've got $1 gazillion. Like, why would I want to, modernize something that was near perfect? I'm never going to capture the same level of innocence and, emotional connection if I try to reboot it."
I also wonder about these kinds of movies, even if you did a modern remake, because ultimately you're absolutely right. What made that movie great was the fact that there was a lot of naivete, there was a lot of innocence.
Yeah.
If you redid that, would that even be something that audiences can stand up to today? I don't think so. I think the modern audience is now more into, and I hate using this, but they want more gritty movies.
Yeah.
And I just don't see something like E.T. E.T. stands up today because of nostalgia. But if you took the nostalgia element out, would that stand up to today's modern kids? I don't think so.
I also feel like we may be romanticizing E.T. That's 1982.
Totally. That's true.
I bet if we watch that movie, we may be like, this is pretty miserable. Like, okay, there's some redeeming parts, and yes, I'm getting a little bit misty-eyed, when Elliot's bike, rides and you see the silhouette in front of the moon and so forth. But like, we may also be like, oh, it was a lot better before I saw it again. My memory was...
Could be. I mean, that's exactly what happened to me with Back to the Future, to be honest. I didn't think anything of it when I watched it as a kid. And then you watch it and you're just like, oh man, his mom almost commits incest on him. You know what I mean? Like, it's creepy. Like, there's a lot of really creepy things. How is this teenager best friends with this, 60-year-old professor?
I know that they said, whenever they pitched this movie, it's just a miracle it got through because, the pitch just sounds so bad,
there's a lot that's wrong with it. And I think, the guy who actually encapsulated it best for me there's a comedian, John Mulaney.
Yeah.
He did a bit about it in one of his stand-up shows.
I think I know the exact bit, right? He's saying this is the 30-second elevator pitch, right? And it's disastrous.
And exactly. And under today's lens, it would never be made.
Yeah. Yeah. Because even Doc Brown, right? Didn't he steal uranium from the Libyans?
From the Libyans, right? And they had a shootout at the mall. So, exactly. So, anyway, so that's but let's maybe shift our focus to movies that we think can be remade and maybe, I don't know if they should be remade, but could be remade. So we jokingly mentioned it earlier, but Short Circuit for sure
could
be redone today.
Short Circuit should be remade.
And if you want to have an Indian guy in there, have an actual Indian guy in there, not a very clearly white guy in pseudo brown face in there.
What about Scarface? The son takes over the... What do you think?
So you're pitching this as a legacy sequel?
A legacy sequel.
I don't know because I really like Scarface, and I think that was also one of the best movies, right? I think it was close to perfect. I don't know if you'd want to... Let's put it this way. I would approach the legacy sequel to Scarface the same way I did to Top Gun Maverick, which is half of me would be happy because I love Top Gun, but the other half of me would be really scared because I thought Top Gun was perfect. I didn't need to see more of it.
What about Shawshank Redemption? They come for Andy, and he and Red need to escape from wherever they are.
From Zihuatanejo, Mexico?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Shawshank was also just so... They buttoned it up so nicely, didn't they?
Yeah.
It was such a sweet ending, and you're just oh man, I thought that was great. When did that come out? 95?
Oof, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the 90s. All right, let me give you another one. You tell me. It's 1998.
Okay.
Michael Bay had the summer's blockbuster in Armageddon. It ends with Bruce Willis, Harry Stamper dying, but everyone else is still alive and a big star today. So let's have the legacy astronaut of AJ and Grace, Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, who are still quasi A-listers, right? You've still got Will Patton, Chick, Steve Buscemi is still there, Bear is still there, Billy Bob is still there.
Bear's gone.
Bear's gone?
He passed away.
Oh, no.
Michael Clark Duncan, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he passed away.
No more Bear.
No.
And we see the son of Ben and Liv is an astronaut at NASA now. And the comet that they blew up into 1 billion pieces has slingshot around the sun. It's coming back to Earth. And their son leads this NASA mission where they're going to put up this space net to catch all the shrapnel. Okay?
I mean, it would work.
Hold on. Yeah, so I'm not done yet. You're excited now. Wait until you're going to book your ticket by the end of this. One of the big pieces gets through, and it splashes into the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? Or the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean.
Sure.
Pick your ocean, right? And now all these independent miners want to get it because they think it's full of all this very valuable resource. However, NASA knows that if someone starts to drill it, that it's going to release all these toxin gases, it's going to kill all the wildlife and so forth. So they figure out that Ben and Liv have their own drilling company, deep sea drilling company. They get Ben and Liv to get their company to go out and try to retrieve this big piece of rock from the bottom of the ocean before anyone else can get it and crack it open. Are you booking your tickets?
Sorry, yes. That was me going on Fandango looking for the release date.
Oh, good.
It's really interesting that you would say that because that's a legacy sequel because for me, I think a lot of people found that the love story element of it was what drove a lot of people towards that movie, right? Yep. It had a little bit of everything. It had a great love story. It had a great action story. It was and it was good sci-fi as well.
Yeah.
So it was really a good mix of everything.
Do you want me to blow your mind even further by adding a crazier element?
Go.
When they get to the asteroid, they find out that Bruce Willis, Harry Stamper, is alive. He's been cryogenically frozen.
right, you lost me there. That's one step too far. One step too far.
Harry sees Billy Bob. He says, "Give me my patch back."
All right, one step too far, but I love it. In principle, I don't have a problem with that. It's no more outlandish than any of the other legacy sequels that we've seen. So I don't have a problem with that on paper. I think the script would have to be kind of killer because that new movie did evoke a lot of great emotions. I don't know how you would do it, but I'm sure if anyone can do it, there's someone out there.
Michael Bay. But I have to say, generally when I was looking at 80s and 90s, a lot of the best movies have already been remade. You know, I mean, I'm looking at the 90s. Okay, you can't remake Titanic, and there's obviously no sequel, right? I mean, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Independence Day. You know, there's nothing you can do for Forrest Gump. Men in Black, we've seen it. Terminator, we've seen it, right? Ghost, there's really nothing else you can do. Toy Story, still going on. Saving Private Ryan, there's nothing you can do for this. Home Alone, we've seen a number of them. Home Alone maybe wouldn't be a bad reboot if you had the right kid, right?
They did it again anyway. They did it, not a straight to movie, but they did it with Ellie Kemper and things like that, and someone else.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being good.
Matrix, we've done. Mission Impossible, we've done. You know,
So let me take a different tact, right?
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is you're naming a list of really good movies. And for example, like The Matrix, I thought about that too, because the one thing about The Matrix was it was a techie sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Rarely do those movies stand the test of time, but that one has.
Yeah. Matrix.
Yeah, even after 30 years.
I think the first Matrix is better than the most recent Matrix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So what if thinking along the line of The Matrix, do you remember the movie Hackers?
Vaguely, although I couldn't even put together the synopsis. But yeah, I kind of remember it.
With Johnny Lee Miller, a very young Angelina Jolie, Matthew Lillard, or Sandra Bullock's The Net.
Okay.
Or Keanu Reeves' Johnny Mnemonic.
I kind of remember these, yeah.
So all of these movies were high science fiction, high tech movies. None of them have stood the test of time. Because the depiction of technology was so clunky and so bad. Whereas The Matrix, even though that movie was made in the same generation, has still stood the test of time. So I think, and again, this is not me signaling out one specific movie, but maybe more of a genre. The computer era, or you know what was the other one? Was Lawnmower Man?
I remember Lawnmower Man.
With Russell Crowe as the bad guy. I think those kinds of movies would do very well with a new reboot. Right? The Net was less about technology. It was, it was more of a conspiracy or like a suspense movie. That's fine. You can move that out of the way. I just think the depiction of the internet was done very poorly. But for sure, Hackers, for sure, Johnny Mnemonic.
Do you want to see these as a movie or as a television series?
That's a very interesting question.
Because one of the problems I think I'm having when I visualize something like this is if this is really going to be modernized and you think that there's a lot lost in terms of the portrayal or the depiction of technology, is it enough that the storyline should just be expanded and we should make this a series? Or is it really just a hour and 10 minute, maybe not an hour and 10 minute, hour and a half, hour and 45 minute, like standalone film? Because for me, that name, like none of those brands are enough to get me excited. I mean, I'd have to see the trailer. I'd have to see who's cast. And then to be honest, the brand itself could be something totally different because I feel like it's not really the movie that's being rebooted. It's just kind of the name that's being repurposed, right?
So something like Johnny Mnemonic I could see as like a TV series.
Yeah.
Where, you've got... So the premise of Johnny Mnemonic was Keanu Reeves is a data smuggler.
Okay.
Right? And the idea was that he had a hard drive implanted in his brain. and he was able to copy information into that hard drive, go across like international borders, and then get that data like transferred to somebody else. And the movie I remember was he had 40 gigabytes of space, which is laughable, right? And then he doubles it to 80 gigabytes, but then he ends up getting like 160 gigabytes of data.
But
and
he was
that data
he was a human?
He's a human. He's a human with an implant.
I have to say, I feel like you're kind of onto something. I mean, like, I remember the name of that movie. I don't know if I saw it or not, to be honest. But I have to say, you might be onto something in terms of, like, there's a new, like, gang of smugglers, right? And they're either smuggling data or they're smuggling DNA.
Exactly. It's
right?
not so much about drugs anymore.
Yes.
It's about information. And
Yes.
DNA is a great example of that.
Yeah. Like, that seems like a storyline that I'm a little bit, like, more enthusiastic about.
And what happens is maybe he gets caught in the first episode and he ends up getting turned and has to work with the FBI or with the NSA or with this Black Ops organization, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so he's working as a bad guy, but really he's a good guy. And he can use that data that he's got in his mind to kind of do forensics and, you know, figure out what these bad guys are actually smuggling and stop crimes before they happen.
So he's basically part of a ring. The ring gets busted. He escapes. And now he's got to use the information in his head to try to solve it and exonerate himself. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happens in the movie is that he smuggles data across not knowing what's in that data. And that data turns out to be super valuable data that can cure some kind of disease of some sort. Of the movies of the names that I mentioned, that's probably the most likely to be a TV series.
I could get behind that.
That can be repeated.
I could really get behind that. Yeah. I mean, there could also be something, you know, if you're talking about a TV series, it could also be a guy goes rogue, right? Like one of the mules, let's call him a DNA mule. He goes rogue and realizes what he has, and he starts to create like this little like tribe of like superhumans, right? And people have to, and someone needs to kind of like try to stop him because he's now said, hey, wait a second, I've got this code to like these super soldiers or super, you know, whatever. You know, I can just, you know, do like IVF and create like my whole team of mercenaries or my whole team of, you know, foot soldiers.
Right.
And they have to kind of track him down where he's based, and you know, they're just killing like endless soldiers, but they need to try to cut it off at the root. That wouldn't be bad either. I could get behind this. Do you have any others? I've got 2 other ideas.
I only have one, and that's 3 Men and a Baby, which we kind of jokingly talked about a few episodes ago as well.
I love the idea of 3 Men and a Baby. I am nervous that it's going to be modernized so much that I dislike it, because I thought one of the things about the way that I liked it was that it was just so stereotypical 3 kind of bachelors. I don't want it to turn into something else, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want an agenda.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree. I'm anti-agenda in films. That's not why I'm watching films.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a great comedic aspect to the idea where 3 guys end up with a baby, and what they do is, you know, they use that baby as an excuse to get out of work or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I think it was you who came up with the idea, what if one of the companies merges with the others? And then they have to share that baby, and then it just, all kinds of hijinks ensue. Yeah. This is the kind of movie where you see Jason Bateman, you know, the Horrible Bosses movie? It's those trio. You see Jason Bateman, Charlie Day,
yes,
and you see, who was the third guy?
Jason
Sudeikis, yes. Yeah. When you see the 3 of them kind of juggling one single baby for their own, not nefarious, but for their own selfish agenda.
Yeah, I'm totally into that. I think that Horrible Bosses trio was just exceptional. Just exceptional.
One guy who's the more level-headed of the 3,
Yeah.
One guy who's the totally crazy of the three, and then the other guy who can get swayed one way or the other.
Yeah. I have to say, now that I think back to Horrible Bosses, I think that's just really one of those amazing movies. Jennifer Aniston is wonderful
What
in
a
it.
great turn for Jennifer. I mean, for someone who had such a straight-laced image because of Friends, I thought that was a brilliant maneuver for her.
She's eating a popsicle, a hot dog, a popsicle, a banana, and a hot dog. That's cold to hot. No one eats cold to hot. Okay, here's my two ideas. Ready?
Okay, go.
First of all, I'm looking at the 80s. Do you know that there were 3 popular dance movies in the 80s? Flashdance, Footloose, Dirty Dancing.
Oh my God.
We need to bring back the dancing genre. Kevin Bacon is still around. Rest in peace,
Patrick
Swayze. But we still have Kevin Bacon. Let's do a Footloose.
A dance movie, but not like Step Up to the Streets
I agree.
or whatever.
Yes.
I think that was more flash and pomp.
Yes.
I think that was targeted for the quote-unquote TikTok crowd, if you get my vibe, which is to say it's more about the trend than it was about the actual thing.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Let's do a down south, small town dance movie. A feel-good dance movie. I mean, Step Up is it's a sultry teen kind of love story, right? Let's have a feel-good dance movie. I mean, it's just a genre that if you're looking at genres, right? I mean, there's a lot of medieval stuff, right? There's a lot of sorcerer stuff. Everything's been done. You cannot point to any show or film right now that has any dance element to it.
Apart from not as the central conceit.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. 2 other options.
Okay.
Did you ever see the movie Dave? Dave is a probably straight to video movie where there's a guy who's he looks like the president. So he does kind of like the stand-up bit comedy, like he's the president because he looks like him. The real president has a stroke, is in a coma before re-election. So they go out and they get this comedian who looks just like it. And they say, hey, you've got to play the president for the next couple of weeks until he gets reelected.
Because I know this premise.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie maybe, or this premise, because I know that sounds so familiar.
Yeah. Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. Or even older, did you see the movie Heaven Can Wait? I think I've talked about this on this.
Yes.
Podcast.
I can't remember, but it's an old film.
With Warren Beatty, we absolutely need a new Heaven Can Wait movie. I don't know who's going to play it, but we can definitely do it. The Rams are back in Los Angeles now for American football. It makes even more sense than ever. We'll just have, the equivalent of Elon Musk, who dies unexpectedly, improperly. His body's not available. So instead, the Angels have to put him back in the body of a professional football player. Let's see him just struggle to be a professional athlete. I'm totally into this. So I think these are my other 2 options. Dave, Heaven Can Wait, or we do something in the dance industry or the dance sector, which is Flashdance, Footloose, Dirty Dancing. Really a tragedy. I feel like they made a Dirty Dancing, Cubana Nights or something with a totally different cast that had $1 million gross worldwide. Yeah. And I guess the last idea I have is, in the 80s, we had all these shows and movies with huge families, right? Like Brady Bunch, 8 is Enough, all these huge families, right? My 3 Sons. Even kind of Home Alone had a huge family. Maybe we just need another family-centric movie where there's just a bunch of kids. Always
what, a remake of the Goonies kind of thing?
Maybe. Goonies is tough to remake because I don't think that story is particularly good, actually.
No.
I don't think that story is good. Like, there's nothing particularly interesting about it. It was a little bit weird all the way around. But it was a good movie in the sense that, you know, it was a bro movie before like the term bro was coined. You know, it was like kids coming together and showing this sense of loyalty and dedication and working together. And I think these are my ideas. But I have to say, when you look at the 80s and 90s, for the most part, the good movies have been sequeled to death or they've been reboot. Yeah. Mostly. There's not a lot of easy pickings there, especially when someone like Zemeckis or Spielberg isn't going to play. And also back then, they weren't shy about ending a movie where the main character died, right? Harry Stamper in Armageddon would not have died if they would have made that movie today.
Yeah, or if he had, there would have been like an end credit sequence where you see his glove move on like some floating rock somewhere. Which leads to a potential for a sequel.
It's like For All Mankind, right? Right? I mean, we thought, what was the lady's name who we thought died in the wreckage? And then we find that at the end that she's in Russia. What was her name? Margot. That's how they do it, Apple style. Yeah. But generally, you have to say, like, all the quality films, everything, apart from here and there, right? I mean, there was a sequel to 3 Men and a Baby, right? 3 Men and a Little Lady. So, I mean, they picked that up. I think there was even a Short Circuit 2. There's Beverly Hills Cop 2. So, I mean, it's... And
potentially 3. Now a 4.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff has been picked up. But I think that's really when, you know, you probably need to go back to the 70s to probably look at movies like North by Northwest or whatever the other classics were in the 70s that have
Chinatown.
Right?
I'd love a great hard-boiled detective film noir film. We haven't seen many. We've seen a few. Like Driver came pretty close to being a great film noir.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen so many good film noir or hard-boiled detective movies. The last really good one I can think of is the one with Guy Pearce, LA Confidential.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of movies that I really, really like and miss. That's a genre that I think is relatively niche. But having said that, with these streaming platforms, I think that's a great way to do it. Because they're not high-budget movies, and you don't need to make it, you know, a worldwide release if you can just release it on Paramount Plus or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Maybe our listeners have some ideas as well. We'd love to get some suggestions.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Maybe what you can do, guys, if you're listening, leave a comment on the video below or tweet at us at F&S Podcast or email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Let us know what movies, what TV series you think could do with being either entirely rebooted or a legacy sequel in today's day. Does your favorite movie stand up to time? If not, how would you change it and how would we modernize it? Let us know.
Pete, let me ask you one last question. Pretty Woman, should it be remade? Or too, even for you and me, is it too iconic for that also near perfect rom-com, more rom, not a whole lot of com, to be remade?
Yeah, and it's also a question of, would a remake hold up in today's day? Would a movie about a sex worker involved in a relationship with Richard Gere's character, I can't even remember what he was. Was he a banker or a lawyer or something like that? Yeah. I don't know how much that would hold up under today's lenses. And as you rightly pointed out, it's a pretty iconic film, right? I think it's really the movie that, for me at least, put Julia Roberts on the map. Oh,
yeah, more than anything.
More than even Richard Gere.
Yeah. What did you think of...
Ticket to Paradise.
What did you think?
So it wasn't my favorite, but I felt like they were trying to recapture lightning in a bottle. Good, don't get me wrong, but not...
Can I tell you my flaw? I'll tell you my flaw. I actually felt a very good connection between, what's that dude's name?
George Clooney?
Yeah, George Clooney. Sorry, I blanked. Between George Clooney, I keep thinking of his character's name. I don't know his real name. Between George Clooney and Julia Roberts, I felt that was a very good connection. They were very funny. Yeah. I felt nothing for their daughter.
For the kids. Exactly.
And I thought that a huge mistake was that, like, they just mucked it up in terms of, like, her studying law, going to work at a law firm. Did she go to like law school? Was she taking the bar exam? All that was just, to be honest, wrong. And I'm really surprised that they couldn't just get like anyone to like put a little bit of like common sense into that. But I'm going to rewrite all that. I think she should have been like an environmental lawyer, and she should have just taken the bar exam, and she had 1 month until she started practicing environmental law, right? And she was all about by the book and the briefs and the law and the blah, blah, blah. And she then went to Bali or wherever they were. And she's like, wait a second. Why do I want to spend my life in a courtroom and behind a desk for environmental law? And the dude saw like how passionate she is about like turtles and wildlife. And she like just, that for me would have been a better connection and like a common thread. I didn't feel like anything now.
The other way I thought was that he was her firm's client. He comes to New York.
Yeah.
And the office is like, well, he's a small-time guy.
Yes.
Why don't we send the lowly paralegal off to do the due diligence?
Yes.
We don't want to fly across the world.
Just a seaweed farmer. Yes.
It's just a shitty seaweed farm.
We're going to buy his company. Yes.
And we find out that he's actually a crazy... this is similar to Crazy Rich Asians, which is we find out they're actually from a super wealthy family, and then he's actually really into the environment.
Yes.
That's why he's doing this.
Yes.
And blah, blah, blah. That would have made at least that element a lot more reasonable in my mind.
Yes.
And then I agree with you. The problem with the fact that Julia Roberts and George Clooney's character hate each other didn't work for me because their chemistry, even when they purported to hate each other, was so off the charts good that you're just like, come on, guys. We can all see this coming, right? Like, this is naturally we see what's going to happen at the end of this movie. And they even do that cliche jump off the boat in slow motion or freeze frame last thing. It's I don't know. It on paper, this had everything to be a great rom-com, but it just didn't land for me.
I love the French guy, her younger boyfriend. I thought he was breakout.
The pilot.
Yes. I thought he was so funny. Funny. She's like, can you believe it? He's like, I don't know. I'm on a lot of drugs right now. Do you want me to believe it?
Yeah.
I thought he was the breakout supporting actor of that, but I agree. Like, Clooney and Roberts had like very, very strong chemistry. It was fine, but I thought that the kids' relationship it didn't make sense at all. It had no chemistry at all.
And it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like there was a chemistry. And so ostensibly, I get that this is a romantic comedy, but you had two different romantic plots. Yeah. One of them did not work. Yeah. And that kind of dragged the other down.
I agree. And also there's a lot of family stuff in here, right? So either you need to go the path of my big fat Greek wedding and really make it about
include them.
Yes. Or you've got to like, hey, like they just got together, like, but you can't go kind of the big family, but not really like introduce it.
I speak Bahasa. Some of the translations, not that great.
Oh, really? That's disappointing. Anyway, we probably won't see a sequel to that, will we?
No, and I mean, what are we going to see? That they break up again? Like, And I certainly don't want to see a sequel where we're talking about the kids.
All right.
Anyway.
So that's extra bonus on our 80s, 90s. What should we remake, reboot?
Again, if you've got any thoughts or ideas, please drop us a line. Let us know what movie you want to see or TV show you want to see rebooted. Don't tell us we already know about that 70s show. That's coming out soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that 90s show.
Oh.
I think that 90s show.
That's funny. All right. What about, do you remember like there was also like this 2-year period where like it was all about like technology vehicles, right? There's like Airwolf and Street Hawk and Knight Rider. Do you remember this phase?
I do.
Right?
I do.
The old David Hasselhoff before he went to Baywatch phase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any appetite for rebooting any of these?
No, because it's like Chips back in the 70s. All your crimes have to be based around that vehicle. Yeah. You have to then justify that, right? That's the thing about Chips that I always found hilarious is every crime they busted somehow ended up on the Pacific Coast Highway, on the 405 in California, because that was their purview. It wasn't some warehouse in the middle of the city, because you don't see the California Highway Patrol in the middle of Los Angeles. So if you did a reboot of Airwolf, all the crimes that occur on that show will have to somehow be broken up by two guys sitting in a helicopter. Which is, you severely limit that. And then if you don't, then it becomes a bit ridiculous.
And helicopters are so delicate.
Totally. Remember that? Even Hulk Hogan, he did a movie about speedboats.
Hulk Hogan did a movie about speedboats?
Oh, yeah.
Why isn't this on your list to be reboot?
Because it's Hulk Hogan.
All the more.
He himself hasn't stood up.
Hulk Hogan and speedboats? I'm in. Where do I book my ticket? What's the name of the movie called? Do you feel like Hulk Hogan's agent was just trying to screw him by giving him look, Hulk. He's like, hey man, I'm the most popular wrestler in the world. Do you have any movies for me? He's like, I've got two. One's about Fred Savage, who's going to play video games. And the other is about you're a speedboat captain. And Hulk's like, that's it? There's nothing else? Nope. Only those two.
That's right. Thunder in Paradise.
Oh, I do remember that. Oh, that's a TV show.
It was a TV show.
And that was this gray boat that had I'm in on that. Yeah, bring back Thunder in Paradise. That
was a TV show that they transitioned into making two straight to DVD or straight to VHS movies after, where it was two, I think they were Army guys or what's the military? The Navy guys. There were two Navy guys who end up working as the A-team with a very fast boat.
Dude, I'm totally in on this. And I think we should reboot it where some Hollywood couple gets busted for this. And as part of their plea bargain, they're given this high technology, boat. And they're supposed to now patrol the area between Miami
and Cuba
for drug runners.
Yeah.
And because they've got this boat that looks like it's just like this sunbather, and because they don't look like they're, border patrol, but then this boat can suddenly shift into this massive speedboat with all this artillery, and they've got to track down all these drug runners. I'm in on this.
Yeah.
And make it Jessica Simpson and someone equally hapless. Who?
What was her husband's name? Nick, whatever his name was.
Yeah, Nick Lachey, but they're divorced in real life. But let's think of who's a tone deaf Pete Davidson. Make it Pete Davidson.
Oh God.
Right? Make it Pete Davidson and Jessica Simpson as this hopeless Hollywood couple that's been busted for drug possession or something else. And this is their...
Yeah, and that's their cover, right? Is that they're on they're on recovery. They've been exiled from Hollywood. They get invited to all the famous parties where they see mounds and mounds of cocaine, and they're all right, this is our in. Yeah. So two hapless C-list stars today who were on a 70s TV show and were super famous.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is not so, even though it's terrible, it's not so terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible also because it was Hulk Hogan, a man who was he's known for getting hit in the head with a chair. Not exactly the best actor.
He's never worn sleeves in his whole life. Can you just imagine? He's never had a shirt with sleeves.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give a free hoodie to any listener who can send us a photo of Hulk Hogan ever wearing something where he's got sleeves on. I just don't think he's ever
had. And court appearances do not count.
Court appearances do not count. Did he wear sleeves for his court appearance?
He must have, right?
I don't know. He's probably like, how do I put this thing on?
Why does this feel so constricting?
Damn, this is crazy. I can't even see my arms. It's like a straitjacket. Fun episode.
Anyway, that was our tangents.
Yep. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Reach out to us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ethan.
All right, Pete. We'll see you guys next time on Films and Stuff.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.